Men, words reveal more than actions sometimes, and female psychology proves it. A woman who's been with too many men often gives herself away, not through what she does, but what she says. These 7 words might seem casual, harmless, even ordinary, but when you hear them often, they're powerful indicators that her past is far more crowded than she admits. Before we dive in, hit hype, subscribe, smash, and the like button. Drop a comment if you've ever heard any of these words. You might help another man open his eyes before it's too late. Let's break down these 8 revealing words and understand exactly what they're communicating beneath the surface. Word 1, experience. When she uses experience to justify her opinions about relationships or intimacy, it often hints at a long history. Phrases like, "I have a lot of experience with that," or "from my past experiences," aren't just casual remarks. They're subtle indicators. She's referencing a large pool of partners. Female psychology shows that women with high partner counts use experience as a way to normalize it and make it sound sophisticated rather than revealing. It's a reframing technique that transforms quantity into quality, turning a potentially uncomfortable truth into an asset. After all, experience sounds worldly, wise, mature. It carries connotations of learning and growth rather than impulsivity or poor decision-making. Think about how the word functions in other contexts. When someone talks about having experience in their career, we assume they've put in years of work and accumulated valuable knowledge. When applied to relationships and intimacy, the same connotation is intentionally borrowed. She wants you to perceive her extensive history as wisdom rather than as a red flag. Listen carefully to the context. When she brings up her experience frequently, especially unsolicited, it's because she's signaling something. She might say things like, "Trust me, I have experience with men like that," or "I've been through enough to know what I want." While these statements sound confident and self-assured, they're also admissions of extensive romantic and sexual history. The psychology behind this word choice is fascinating. By framing her past in terms of experience, she's attempting to control the narrative. She's not someone who made questionable choices or lacked discernment. She's someone who actively sought knowledge through varied encounters. It transforms her from passive participant to active learner, from someone things happened to into someone who made things happen for growth. Word 2, everyone. If she frequently says things like, "Everyone does that," or "Everyone I know has done this," it's often a defense mechanism to downplay her own choices. She's projecting her behavior as standard to reduce scrutiny. When everyone suddenly becomes the shield, it's usually because her behavior needs to be justified. This is a classic psychological projection technique. By universalizing her actions, she attempts to remove the spotlight from herself. If everyone is doing it, then her choices aren't outliers. They're normal, acceptable, even expected. This linguistic strategy is particularly common when discussing casual relationships, hookup culture, or attitudes toward commitment. The psychology of consensus is powerful. Humans are social creatures who take comfort in fitting in with group norms. When someone tells us that everyone engages in certain behavior, we're psychologically primed to view that behavior more favorably, or at least more neutrally. We don't want to be judgmental outliers who hold unrealistic standards. This is exactly the psychological response she's hoping to trigger when she repeatedly invokes everyone. Pay attention when she uses everyone to normalize behaviors that aren't actually universal. For example, if she says everyone has casual hookups nowadays, or everyone experiments in their 20s, she's likely speaking from personal experience and trying to make you believe it's standard practice. She's creating a false consensus to avoid feeling judged or different. But let's reality check this claim. Everyone doesn't do everything. Statistics on sexual behavior show enormous variation. While hookup culture exists, Plenty of people navigate their 20s without extensive casual encounters. Many people prioritize meaningful connections over experimentation. When someone insists that everyone shares their approach, they're usually surrounded by like-minded people who reinforce their choices, and they're projecting that bubble onto the entire population. The everyone defense becomes particularly suspicious when applied to increasingly specific situations. It's one thing to say everyone dates. That's relatively true. It's quite another to say everyone has threesomes, or everyone cheats at some point, or everyone has casual sex with strangers. As the behavior becomes more specific and less universal, the claim becomes more revealing about her personal history. Word 3, phase. One of the most revealing words. When she says, "That was just a phase," she's often referring to periods of reckless decisions, including casual encounters. It's a classic minimization tactic, labeling behavior as temporary to avoid accountability. Female psychology shows that using phase reframes a pattern into something temporary and dismissible, but it's rarely ever just once. The word phase is psychologically strategic. It suggests the behavior was an anomaly, not a reflection of core character or values. It implies a clear beginning and end, with current her being distinctly different from past her. But here's the truth. People don't typically call something a phase unless it lasted long enough or was significant enough to warrant explanation and distancing. Think about how we use phase in other contexts. Teenagers go through phases with music, fashion, or hobbies. These are typically short-lived enthusiasms that don't reflect their permanent identity. By applying this same framework to relationship and sexual behavior, she's borrowing the same dismissive quality. She wants you to view her past the way you'd view someone's brief obsession with punk rock or vegetarianism. Interesting, maybe a bit quirky, but ultimately not defining. When you hear phrases like, "I went through a wild phase in college," or "I had a phase where I wasn't looking for anything serious," what she's really saying is that there was a period, possibly years, where traditional relationship boundaries didn't apply to her. She might have had multiple partners, engaged in casual encounters, or participated in situations she now recognizes wouldn't align with your values. The duration matters significantly. A genuine phase might last weeks or a few months, but when the phase spans multiple years, say all 4 years of college or her entire 20s, it's no longer a phase. It's a lifestyle, a pattern, a choice that was sustained over time. The language of phase is being misapplied to minimize the significance and duration of the behavior. Pay attention to how vaguely she defines the time period. She might say, "I had a wild phase," without specifying when it started or ended. This vagueness is intentional. Pinning down specific timeframes would reveal just how extended the phase actually was. It also allows her to keep expanding the definition if more details about her past emerge. "Oh, that was all part of the same phase," becomes a convenient catch-all for any revelations. Word 4, adventure. When intimacy and relationships are described as adventures, it's often a sign of novelty-seeking behavior. Phrases like, "I was just exploring," or "I love trying new adventures," often mask impulsive decisions. It's a linguistic way of reframing promiscuity as curiosity. The adventure framework is particularly clever because it borrows from positive, socially acceptable contexts. Everyone admires adventurousness in travel, career, or personal development. Adventure suggests courage, curiosity, and a zest for life. These are attractive qualities, but when this language bleeds into how she describes her romantic and sexual history, it's a red flag worth noting. Listen for statements like, "I went on a lot of adventures in my 20s," or "I'm someone who loves new adventures." In relationship contexts, adventure is often code for experiences that pushed boundaries, broke conventions, or prioritized novelty over stability. It romanticizes behavior that might otherwise be questioned. The psychology of adventure language is sophisticated. By framing casual encounters or numerous partners as adventures, she accomplishes several things simultaneously. First, she makes herself seem exciting and interesting rather than impulsive or lacking judgment. Second, she implies that her experiences have enriched her rather than damaged her capacity for committed relationships. Third, she suggests that anyone who questions this approach is boring, conventional, or afraid of life. But let's examine what adventure really means in this context. When applied to travel, an adventure might mean trying unfamiliar food, exploring unknown places, or stepping outside your comfort zone. These experiences broaden your perspective and create memories. When applied to intimate relationships, however, adventure often means encounters without emotional connection, physical experiences divorced from meaningful relationships, or prioritizing novelty over depth. From a psychological perspective, constant adventure-seeking and intimacy suggests someone who may struggle with sustained commitment or who seeks validation through new experiences rather than deepening existing connections. The thrill of novelty, new person, new experience, new validation, can become addictive. Each adventure provides a dopamine hit, but like any thrill-seeking behavior, it requires escalation to maintain the same level of excitement. Word 5. Open-minded. This word is often used to test how much you'll accept. When she says she's open-minded, especially around intimacy or relationships, it's often code for having pushed boundaries before. Female psychology shows that open-minded is used to soften the truth and prepare you for revelations about her past without directly admitting them. Being open-minded is generally considered a virtue. It suggests tolerance, flexibility, and progressive thinking. In intellectual contexts, open-mindedness means being willing to consider new ideas and perspectives. But in relationship contexts, it's often a euphemism for experiences or values that deviate from traditional norms. When she emphasizes how open-minded she is, she's often testing whether you'll be accepting of her past choices. Pay attention to phrases like, "I hope you're open-minded about things," or "I need someone who's open-minded like me." These aren't just statements about personality compatibility. They're trial balloons. She's gauging your reaction to determine how much she can reveal without risking judgment or rejection. She's essentially asking, "If I tell you about my past, will you still accept me?" The strategic use of open-minded is a preemptive defense. By framing acceptance as a virtue and judgment as a flaw, she positions any concerns you might have as your problem, not hers. It's a way of flipping the script. Instead of her defending her past, you're expected to prove your worthiness by accepting it without question. This is emotional manipulation, disguised as progressive values. Consider the context where she brings up open-mindedness. Is it early in the relationship, before you've had serious conversations about values? That's strategic timing. She's establishing the ground rules before revelations occur. Is it when discussing past relationships or sexual history? That's preparing you for information she anticipates will challenge your comfort level. Is it after you've expressed traditional values about relationships? That's testing whether you're flexible enough to overlook the disconnect between your values and her history. The psychology here is about managing cognitive dissonance. She likely recognizes that her past behavior may conflict with what she wants now or what you might want. Rather than directly addressing this conflict, she uses open-minded to suggest that the problem lies with narrow-mindedness, not with her choices. If you have concerns, you're not being reasonable, you're being judgmental. Word 6. No judgments. If she insists, "I don't like judgmental people," or "I hope you're not judgmental," pay attention. This is often said by women who anticipate judgment, which usually means there's something to judge. She's not warning you for no reason. She's preparing you for a past she knows many men would question. This phrase is particularly revealing because it's preemptive. Think about it. People who haven't done anything controversial rarely feel the need to establish no judgment zones early in relationships. When someone repeatedly emphasizes that they value non-judgmental attitudes, it's usually because their history contains elements that typically invite judgment. The psychology here is straightforward. She's managing expectations and setting boundaries before revelations occur. By establishing that you must be non-judgmental to continue the relationship, she's creating a framework where your legitimate concerns or preferences can be dismissed as moral rigidity or closed-mindedness. It's a preemptive strike against any reaction you might have to learning about her past. Listen for variations like, "I value people who don't judge others for their past," or "We all make mistakes, so I don't judge." These statements aren't just about general philosophy, they're personal. They're telling you something specific about her history and her expectation that you'll accept it unconditionally. The frequency of these statements correlates directly with the magnitude of what she's preparing to reveal or hide. But let's talk about what judgment actually means. There's a massive difference between being judgmental in the negative sense, being self-righteous, hypocritical, or condemning, and exercising judgment in the sense of discernment and decision-making. Everyone exercises judgment constantly. We judge whether situations are safe, whether people are trustworthy, whether choices align with our values. This is healthy and necessary. When she insists on no judgment, she's often conflating these two meanings. She wants you to abandon your discernment and standards, while framing it as avoiding the negative judgmental attitude. But you can avoid being self-righteous while still having standards. You can refrain from condemning her while still deciding her past makes her incompatible with what you're looking for. The no judgment framework is particularly insidious because it makes you the problem. If you have concerns about her past, you're being judgmental. If you have preferences about partner history, you're being narrow-minded. Your very reasonable boundaries are reframed as moral failing. This is gaslighting, making you doubt your own reasonable reactions and standards. Word 7, free. When she frequently says things like, "I'm a free spirit," or "I believe in freedom," it's not always about independence. In relationship psychology, it's often used by those who reject traditional boundaries, and who may have had many partners under the banner of freedom. This language normalizes behaviors that would otherwise raise questions. The concept of freedom is universally positive. Everyone values freedom in some form. It's foundational to human dignity and self-determination. But when freedom becomes a central theme in how she describes her approach to relationships and intimacy, it's worth understanding what she means by it. Often, it's code for resistance to commitment, boundaries, or conventional relationship structures. Phrases like, "I'm a free spirit who doesn't like being tied down," or "I need someone who understands my need for freedom," aren't just about personality traits. They're about relationship history and future expectations. They suggest someone who has prioritized personal autonomy over relational commitment, often resulting in numerous short-term connections rather than fewer sustained partnerships. The freedom framework is particularly effective because it's difficult to challenge without sounding controlling or traditional. Who wants to be the person arguing against freedom? Who wants to be seen as someone who wants to tie her down or restrict her? This is precisely why the language is so strategic. It frames any desire for commitment, exclusivity, or traditional relationship structure as oppressive, while framing her resistance to these things as healthy and positive. In psychology, this orientation often correlates with avoidant attachment styles. People who consistently emphasize their need for freedom in relationships often have difficulty with emotional intimacy, commitment, and interdependence. They experience closeness as threatening to their autonomy. They interpret normal relationship expectations, spending time together, building a shared life, being emotionally available, as constraints on their freedom. Here's the critical question: is she describing freedom to be herself within a relationship, or freedom from relationship itself? The former is healthy, the latter is incompatible with what most men want in a committed partner. You can honor her freedom while also recognizing that what she wants and what you want may be fundamentally incompatible.